afternoon to our viewers here in our Zoom room. The Imaginatives here with us today are students and professionals from the public and private sectors across different agencies and organizations and the academe. We welcome you to the month-long event of the Philippine Futures Thinking Society, the Fiesta of Imagination. The Fiesta of Imagination will take you to a great leap of futures and foresight and signifies the PhilFuture's first year founding anniversary. And what's exciting is that it only begins here. As a movement, together with all Imaginatives here today, we continue our vision to ignite the Filipino Hiraya through the power of foresight, and through this event, aim to indigenize the praxis of futures thinking to celebrate our identity as a nation, to harvest the abundance of our imaginations para sa kinabukasan or for the future. Today, you will witness our roots and how we navigate the futures. As a grand opening, we bring you the Hiraya Foresight, an exploration of an indigenous-based futures thinking. Without further ado, to formally start, it is my pleasure to call on our host and moderator, the PhilFuture's very own corporate secretary and the director at the UP National College of Public Administration and Governance, Dr. Reginald G. Ugadan.
Thank you very much, Celine. Thank you very much for that very good introduction. It is indeed a fiesta of imagination. For it's a month-long celebration that kind of a celebration for PhilFutures. Since we started this this effort of bringing or trying to bring the perspective of futures thinking in public policy in all aspects of our lives here in the Philippines. And now for this opening salvo of the Fiesta of Imagination, it will be a great discussion. It will be a discussion of looking at the very nature or the very idea or the perspectives that we want to bring with you, the PhilFutures Thinking Society of the Philippines, Futures Thinking Society, discussing about what is this all about Hiraya Foresight. And we would like, of course, to explore the very idea of bringing this futures thinking or trying to indigenizing futures thinking, right? Based on our culture, based on our norms. And we have here with us, of course, the president and the very active and tiring Dr. Lizan Iperante, the president of PhilFutures Thinking Society, as well as the Philippine Society of Public Administration, and also currently, of course, the dean of the Graduate School of Public and Development Management at the Development Academy of the Philippines, that she will later, of course, discuss with us. Maybe we'll try to bring a strong provocations, right, that we've been trying to popularize, not only in the Philippines, but of course, all over the world. She'll be discussing with you again the roots of the PhilFutures, the PhilFutures, I should say, and of course the very idea of Hiraya Foresight. Okay, so Dean Lizan will be discussing that later on, and of course we have here with us as well two futurists, the popular futurists in the world, of course, Miss Sophie and Mauricio, the Professor Mauricio, that will later on join us. Will be joining us in discussing or trying to maybe if we can really thresh out, right, or bring more understanding of what is this indigenization means and how important it is in futures thinking, or maybe in foresight and futures thinking. So without so much ado, I would like to invite our an idol now, right? Of course, very popular in the Philippines in the field of public administration or in any areas now, of course, in futures thinking. Please join me in welcoming our very own Dean Lizan Iperante Kalina for the talk on the introduction of the PhilFutures and Hiraya Foresight, and of course, an exploration of indigenous-based futures thinking. Dean Lizan.
Thank you very much, Doc Reg, for that very kind introduction of yours. So I would like to greet everyone. Happy Futures Day. and happy Fiesta of Imagination to all of you. And today I am going to talk about the Hiraya Foresight, which I would say is a truly Philippine indigenous approach to futures thinking. And let me begin my provocation. In the past, we Asians tended to adopt and borrow Western theories and concepts. And this has been so and is still in our own country, which has been colonized by Spain for more than 333 years, starting from 1565 to 1898. And in that long colonial period, the colonial mentality of course, of our people cannot but emerge such that indigenous concepts were all relegated to the sidelines, if not vanished to nowhere. So this tendency has started to be reversed by well-meaning Filipino scholars and researchers. They have found the hidden wisdom of the indigenous words and phrases, and that they often shed more and deeper meaning to the reality we are surrounded with than the foreign derived words. The Hiraya foresight as a component of the future's leadership and governance framework. Of course, this one, as seen on your screen, is is an interaction, or these are interrelated components that contribute to individual sums. The total whole is achieved, which is called now the Hiraya foresight framework. And the Hiraya foresight there is an integral and indispensable component of the overall framework. But then again, what is Hiraya? So in the Philippines, so many indigenous concepts abound. There is the concept of kapwa, meaning the other person. Relating with one's kapwa or pakikipagkapwa means something that is a good relationship. And it is done with reciprocity, mutual help, kindness, respect, courtesy, and politeness, care, concern, and love. With kapwa, there is a feeling of galang, malasakit, pananagutan, among other concepts. Galang is respect. Malasakit is sacrifice. Pananagutan is obligation or responsibility to others. Cooperation and collaboration are not just all Western concepts. The Philippines has indigenous counterpart concepts that mean collective assistance on a voluntary basis, such as bayanihan and balikatan. The word bayanihan is derived from the root word bayani or hero. Hence, bayanihan is practicing collective heroism, as in transferring a house from one place to another for no pay at all. Balikatan comes from the root word balikat or shoulder. Hence, balikatan is collective help with the use of the shoulder to carry loads or heavy weights. My team at the DAP Graduate School and Philippine Futures Thinking Society took a long, hard time to select which among the indigenous words should represent as our icon or symbol bearer representing our heart and soul. After a search process, we chose Hiraya as our beacon, our light towards the future. But what is Hiraya? So, Hiraya as a concept has ancient Filipino words. You see how the word is written using the ancient Filipino system of writing. There, you will see the Baybayin, now lost in the midst of time except by one tribe in Mindoro, the Hanunuo Mangyan. Second, it is the only word that gives the potential of the future, of tomorrow, to illuminate on the present. The simple word is kinabukasan, or future. There is no other word that comes closest to the future and the promise that the future may hold. The future here is assumed to give a better outcome, and that is the glow of the word Hiraya, for it subsumes in it the idea of hope, of getting realizing soon to come benefits. So then, what does Hiraya connote? As a standalone word, it means the fruits of one's hopes, dreams, and aspirations. Any person always has dreams, dreams of becoming one someday. Maybe a doctor, a bank teller, a computer manager, or a teacher. A person who keeps on hoping, continuing dreaming, and aspiring would reap the fruit of his or her efforts, the hiraya. These fruits would be the realization of one's dreams and aspirations. It would come in the form of benefits like the goodness of health, the stability of one's finances, the permanence of one's relationship with a beloved, and for young people, the realization of being someday a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, and a professional. In usage, Hiraya is usually attached to another word to become the phrase Hiraya Manawari, which is wishing good to someone who is close to the well-wisher, a friend or a relative. The two words together get transformed to wish someone. May you reach your dreams. Sana ay matupad ang iyong kahilingan at pangarap. It may also mean, may the wishes of your heart be granted. Hiraya Manawari is a wish for the good of someone. Similarly, we futures thinkers may say to ourselves, may we reach our dreams, or may our objectives and goals succeed. Hope it comes to pass is another connotation of Hiraya Manawari. This is a hope that everyone affected by a calamity or misfortune or problem may get over it at once or quickly. This is expressed as well in Hiraya Manawari, urging each one in the community to bear the temporary sacrifice, to be patient for the unfortunate event will take its natural course and come to pass. Like the typhoon, it comes, passes through, and then goes out after a few hours. We futures thinkers also have such an orientation, saying to ourselves, hope COVID-19 comes to pass, or hope this typhoon comes to pass. The Hiraya Manawari or the Hiraya Foresight adds specific context, cultural particularities, local color, if not the features thinkers' quality ways of thinking. Hiraya connotes other nonverbal significances, for it embeds or contains other but unspoken, unexpressible ideas with just one word. Hiraya is vision. The concept, of course, embeds in it a vision of the future. The vision is looked at in terms of dreams, wishes, and aspirations. One cannot talk of Hiraya without talking of the future vision. Though expressed in dreams, wishes, and aspirations, Hiraya is not equivalent to fantasies or castles in the air. It takes on the potential of a dream to become a reality, the potential of a wish or aspiration to bear fruit. Hiraya sees the future not as a static object, but a dynamic change agent, a change variable that makes things better and that improves the existing state of things. Hiraya is concern, care, and love. Someone wishing for love also activate the reciprocal, um, saying the word may your dream come true, or a phrase may your dream come true. It does not say it without attaching the subjective emotions of concern, care, and love. Concern is expressed because the well-wisher considers the other as his or her own neighbor or relative, even if actually he or she is not. The concern is manifested in the sense that whatever problems one has also becomes the other's problems. Hiraya is about cooperation and collaboration. Hiraya, as a wish to summon, also activate the reciprocal obligation mode among two interactants or among the members of a community. The Hiraya implants or already contains the seed of future collaboration and cooperation in collective undertakings. Even without asking, the one was one time wished Hiraya Manawari will return the favor by not only returning the wish to a friend, but also to participate voluntarily in future collaborative endeavors in the community. Hiraya is about persistence, perseverance, patience, and at the same time, courage, fortitude, and resilience. Hiraya Manawari demonstrates the power of the community members to persist going on with their tasks despite hardships inflicted by calamities. It shows their determined perseverance to continue amidst the scarcity of the times. It also shows their patience, their willingness to work hard and to endure even with until the calamity passes through. At the same time, it reflects one's courage and bravery to go on against great odds, hurdles, and barriers. It signifies fortitude, a spiritual form of courage to keep the faith that after the darkness, the light will still be found at the end of the tunnel. Lastly, it shows resilience, the current popular term in the language of disaster risk reduction and management, and that after the passing of a calamity, the community members are still able to pick up the pieces of what is left of their lives and property and to build up slowly but surely a new lease on their lives. Hiraya is about optimism, positive thinking, preparedness, and alertness. The Hiraya wish is a natural expression of hope and optimism. If Westerners could say, hope springs eternal, or beyond the clouds, the sun is still shining, or beyond the silver lining, we in the Philippines may just say Hiraya Manawari, and that means just the same as in the Western context, and even more. While Western poets strive for a metaphor to catch the hope and the optimism, the two words Hiraya Manawari at once captures all of those sayings without recourse to metaphors. Hiraya regards the future as full of hope. There is confidence in the future, which generates a feeling of optimism and ushers in a positive enlightenment of what the future can offer. Because of such confidence and optimism, the members of a community now engaged in future thinking activities are always prepared and alert to what the future may bring. Hiraya implies wisdom and ethics in action. Because the future can be looked at in a positive light, the community has a source of inspiration to do things wisely, appropriately, and rightly. The future can make the community to look for ways of doing things that are good and of benefit to everybody else. And also, Hiraya implies that the future can be studied, analyzed, researched, and planned. With our activities right now, and of course, with Hiraya, with confidence in the future, and with the members of the community prepared and alert and ready to collaborate and to cooperate, then everyone can study, do research, analyze the future as well, and plan for the future. Institutionalizing and systematizing Hiraya is one thing that we are doing right now. So the Hiraya Foresight is the answer. It's the framework of Phil Features to its dream of institutionalizing and democratizing futures thinking in the Philippines, if not in the Asia Pacific region. Institutionalization is establishing the agency to function as the unit that will take charge of implementing futures thinking in the Philippines. The creation of Phil Features has rolled the institutionalization process, and the adoption of the Hiraya linguistic and visual symbol completes the institutionalization of futures thinking on the basis of indigenous concepts. Systematization likewise means full blast and complete undertaking of the duties and functions of futures thinking conceptualization, planning, implantation, and evaluation in the whole range of foresight and futures thinking activities, namely foresight education, research, training, and advocacy. Indeed, the process of institutionalization and systematization of futures thinking has been undertaken, and some activities are currently undergoing. Thus, I am confident that Phil Features has chosen the appropriate and indigenous concept as our linguistic visual icon. As I have enumerated, Hiraya as a foresight concept and approach subsumes other meanings and connotations. This indigenous concept actually opens up a veritable cache of other indigenous concepts that are similarly rich in such meaning implications and meaning significances. Maraming salamat, Hiraya Manawari.
Yeah. Maraming salamat din, Lizan. Kiraya Manawari. Ayan. So, okay, before we will proceed with our panel reactors with Sophia and Mao, please allow me to introduce them for everyone. Um, let me just introduce our panel members for the discussions, our panelists. We have with us Ms. Sophia Basile. I hope I was able to pronounce this right, Sophia. Um, Sophia is, of course, she's a long-time education professional, the ICF trained coach, consultant, a facilitator, and soon to be a certified Foresight practitioner as well. Connector of dots, people, ideas, dreams, a learner, companion, guide on journeys of self, individual and collective inquiry. So Sophia has partnered with a range of purpose and impact-driven individuals, institutions, and organizations for projects across diverse areas of interest and industry. So much of our work is committed to building awareness and capacities around futures and foresight in marginalized and underrepresented communities. So currently, she is the community manager of Future Space, the digital home for futurists and futures activists, and serving on several task forces in the APF's transformation efforts. Sophia is also a co-director of the upcoming 7th Annual Asia Pacific Futures Network Conference. For ongoing works, Sophia is involved in inclusive decolonial and Black futures initiatives, personal futures frameworks, and explorations at the intersection of spirituality, culture, and health and wellness. Perpetually curious and a self-proclaimed outlier. Sophia decided to contribute to this course in the realm of what she, for now, describes as fringe futures, bringing imaginations of lesser explored topics to the fore in commune with those not ordinarily represented, members of the professional futures community, and everyone in between. Okay. Prof. Mauricio Hernandez, futures and foresight practitioner, and of course a professor at the Universidad del Futuro. Mauricio is a futures and foresight practitioner, and an expert in political perspective, international relations, government and public policy. Has more than 20 years of work experience and knowledge in the areas of government, education, and legislative advisory, with a futures studies perspectives, of course, teaching, analyzing, and offering solutions over the mentioned topics. He has also done international academic and professional work, for example, in Sweden, the United States, China, and Venezuela, wherein he got to enjoy the diverse cultural environments. Okay, so there you are. So we have our panelists, Sophia and Mauricio. I think we can start with the discussion with Sophia, maybe some thoughts from Sophia first, and later on we'll have Prof. Mauricio. Hi, Sophia.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone who's on this side of the world in Southeast Asia. I'm here in Bali, so we're actually on the same hour and minute.
Oh.
But everyone else, good morning, and any Australians heading into the evening, good evening. I'm Sophia, as mentioned, and yes, I have had the privilege of getting to know a lot more about Asia, having lived here over the past couple of years, but especially coming into Futures and Foresight about 2 years ago, and last year being a participant in the 6th annual APFN was really a turning point, and I was just mind boggled at what you all were able to achieve. The Philippines is such an inspiring story, and I look to it and I see a lot of resonance in ideas that I've been exploring on my own. For example, I happened to be in a decolonizing knowledge and wisdom systems meeting with somebody from Yale NUS in Singapore, Dr. Saeed Farid Alatas, and we got into a WhatsApp conversation, and I mentioned that something in me, I'm of Haitian descent. So if anybody knows the story of the Haitian Revolution and colonization there, it was the first colony to overthrow the French colonizers as well as establish a democracy. I just had this feeling that the Haitian Revolution, I didn't learn about it till much later, but there's some key there to where we should be looking for where we go next. And he mentioned to me, well, I could make the same argument about the Philippine Revolution. And that just really triggered something in my mind. And it's not something I've gotten to fully explore lately or yet. as of yet, but there are definitely parallels there. And I look to the Philippines, and I have more questions, as most futurists do, than answers about Hiraya. But I'm so looking forward to learning about this Indigenous Futures Framework, especially because indigeneity is worldwide. Yet, me being from North America and being of Caribbean ancestry, there's a lot of commonalities and there's a lot of intersection. Yet, there's very different qualities and attributes to be leveraged. So, I'm so thrilled that the Philippines is really just off running with this. And I see so many positive things in what you're going to be able to contribute to the global conversation about indigeneity and the intersection of spirituality, culture, and decolonizing of everything, education, and of our mindset. So, best of luck to you all. Thank you all for having me here in the first place. And I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sophia. Maybe later on we'll be asking you some questions as well. You started talking about decolonization already there. I have more questions as well. Maybe what are your thoughts about the model that we are having here in the Philippines? We're trying, of course, to embed future thinking in all what we want to do, of course, in the government or other industries, or of course, in the individual level as well, right? Thank you very much for that. We'll have a conversation more later. Mao, what do you think? Maybe let's have an introductory thought first, or a statement from Prof. Mao.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and good morning from Mexico City. And I'm
Good
very,
morning.
very happy to be here. And as I was listening to Lisan and the definition, the very broad definition of Hiraya and Hiraya Foresight, I realized how much we all have in common. And I mean, our countries and our regions, independently of the fact that we are very far away, we have a lot of things in common. And as I was listening to all this cooperation, connection, uh, resilience, perseverance, bravery, I mean, Hiraya is a very broad concept that means a lot of things, but I think we all can relate to that. And that's very important because there's a factor of connection that is very important. That's one first comment that I wanted to do. And then as a Mexican and as a Latin American, I think we have a lot of common with Asia and with the Philippines because we also were a colony for 300 years of
Wow.
Spain. And then by like all the 19th century was a struggle time for my region and for my country. Uh, we had we had invasions. We lost half of our territory in a war with another country, and it was a lot of struggle. And then I think in all that time, since we are an independent country, and I'm talking about my country, Mexico, we haven't been able. That's my personal opinion. We haven't been able uh, to have an idea, a vision of what future we want. And I think that's why foresight and futures is a very important tool and a very powerful tool to stop just thinking about the past and create something new towards the future. And I think that's very important. I will cite one phrase from Dr. Jose Rizal, the
Wow.
first futurist, right? I enter the future carrying the memory of the past. I think that's something we have to do here in this region. We have a lot of weights from the past, but we have to learn how to take those weights, how to combine them with the poles we have towards a vision of the future. And when we don't have very clear so far is what kind of future we want. So I think that's the power of futures and foresight, and that's something that I would like to spread among our region here in Latin America. So I will start with that, and we
Yeah.
will follow up with the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Mao. For our audience in the here in Zoom, you can also ask your, maybe you can participate in our discussion or in our conversation by just typing your maybe your thoughts, your ideas also in the chat box. But let me start this conversation now. Right? Yeah, Mao and Sophia, you know, you are both an expert and practitioner of foresight and futures. I just want to, you know, I just want to throw this first question. Why is that really important for us to bring or to have this indigenization or having an indigenous futures thinking? Why is that important? Why is that really relevant? Can we start with Sophia, later on Mao?
Why is it important to integrate the indigenization? Well, because over the centuries of colonization, there's something about all of us who've undergone these centuries of oppression and then the intergenerational trauma that carries through that, that's been lost. That's been lost. And we've seen what happens when we are trying to exist in a way that is not naturally inherent to us. We've abandoned certain things that, I mean, maybe there were problems previously, but we were pretty much thriving in our own ways until, well, colonizers came around and decided to implement these systems. Now, looking at where we are today, I think it's extremely important and something that's a bit of a sore subject because it's about cultural appropriation. Um, is that we have people who are just suddenly inventing things that have been around the whole time, right? But um, they're amplifying indigenous ways in terms of like circular economies and alternative ways of organizing societies, but they're doing so, some of them are doing so from a capitalist point of view, right? And that's not the way that it was meant to be. So we see that it will continue to perpetuate more of the same inequities and inequalities, and it's not going to help us, right? It's just going to drive us further into um, this society where we're having people who are always going to be subjugated and who are always going to pay the costs for the decision that very few are making, right? So one thing is like us marginalized people or minorities, we're actually not a minority. The global south is the majority of the population, right? But the language that's used would have you think that we're only this much, and therefore you internalize that and feel as if you matter this much. So indigenizing things is about coming back to who we were. Um, it wasn't perfect, and we have a lot of unpacking and unlearning to do. And as long as we, for example, looking at your Hiraya Foresight framework, I really love the use of language and going back to that time because the language that we have begun to speak about these topics and don't encompass what they need to, there's baggage there. There's baggage there. So by renaming things and reclaiming things, I think it gives us a more innate sense of empowerment and reclamation of identity. And that's been denied to us for so long. So that's the first and foremost thing. That quote from Rizal was just perfect. We have a lot of baggage. We do. But I really, I've read some memes recently, and we love the word resilience in futures, right? But resilience, you know, especially in Black liberation struggles and other struggles, we're like, I'm tired of being called resilient. I don't want to see how many hits I can take to keep getting back up. So, how can we look at resilience not as how oppressed you can be and keep standing, but how can we look at resilience as transformation, right? So that's just about creating a new narrative around resilience. Our people have always been resilient. So going into those very those innate qualities we have and those things that helped us succeed way back when the odds were supremely against us during these colonized times. And we outsmarted some of the strongest armies and some of the world powers. That's not stuff that was learned in school, right? And in academic institutions. Those are things that came from communal values and spirituality and the very unique confluence of all these factors we've had. So going back to that is going to, I believe, unlock something that has been deferred or denied for so long. And it just starts within, right? It's a lot of unpacking and unlearning for every single one of us. So it's a journey, but in solidarity with people like Mauricio and people in Mexico and South America, people all over the global South who have endured the same plight. It's so important to realize what's common, but also um, borrow what did not exist from us. Like, for example, how you've turned this around. I mean, the Philippine Revolution, as we mentioned, and how you're leading the way in futures thinking could be something. We don't have to reinvent things all the time, right? We can fast forward this process and look for guidance and leadership while honoring each other's individuality, and but also really leaning into our shared story and creating some solidarity. So that's my thoughts on indigeneity in futures. It's requisite at this point because the people telling the narratives are not people who are even indigenous or have really lived and embodied this. So it's getting filtered through something else, and that's not what we need. It's getting filtered through their ways of knowing. And what about ours, right? The originators.
Oh, thank you very much, Sophia. I think that's a very strong, I mean, a strong statement. Why we need really to have or to follow that path of indigenizing futures thinking. Thank you very much, Sophia. Prof. Mao, what do you think? Why do we have to go with this line of thinking of indigenizing futures thinking?
Yeah, I think it's vital to build from indigenization of futures because it's like you have to learn to look at you in the mirror, and from
Mhm.
that point you have to build something new for the future. But you have to do it taking into account your own feelings, your own personality, your own problems. um, I'm an economist, so in general I think that in Latin America we have tried to adopt a lot of economic systems coming from the outside. And we have done it even further than the countries that originated these systems. In my opinion, is that it didn't work very well. And that happened because we were not able to build our own system or trying to adapt the best and just take our own culture, our own personality, and try to build something else. Um, in general, I have had this discussion with some other colleagues, and some people say that it's very difficult to think about the future in our countries because a lot of people don't have that chance because they have a lot of problems every day and they are living day after day because of their economic situation, because of a lot of problems that we have with many people. Um, I mean, if you think about it, yes, we have more than 200 million people in the whole region living in poverty. And we have a very high level of unemployment. I mean, uh, 3 out of every 5 kids that dropped school during 2020 because of COVID-19, they live in Latin America. So they said, like, how are we going to think about futures literacy if it's very difficult to think in just literacy, right? But I think that's why it's important indigenization, because we have to take those problems, those circumstances, and we have to combine them with all the good things and all the advantages and all our strengths, because we also have them. And we can not only see the bad things, of course we have to, and we have to take it into account to take them and to build something else. And what I think we are lacking so far is that vision. We are very proud of our history in general in all our countries. I think we like it a lot. In the region, I mean, you have the Aztecs, you have the Incas, you had a lot of very strong cultures, the Mayas, but you have to learn and find a way to take that and now see into the future. And we have a lot of problems to do that. And I think that we cannot be waiting that this is going to be an initiative from the public administration or only the government. I think that's a problem because people in general are waiting for their governments to take initiative in this. And we have to understand that the initiative is a collective thing. It has to be a collective effort. It has to be built from cooperation and from building a regional identity. But again, you realize when you talk about Hiraya that this regional identity is not really regional. It can be global. It can be really global. And we also have to understand that. We have to combine both things. So I think that's why it's important to think about indigenization. I mean, indigenization is not only the local, which is very important, but right now you also have to think about the global. And you will realize in opportunities like today that we are not that different and we may be want the same things. Why is it so difficult to build to the future on those same things we want? That's my comment.
Thank you very much, Mao, for that thought. Now we have some questions in our chat box, but let me just, because I just wanted to continue to grab this opportunity to ask the question both to Sophia and Mao. Do we mean when we say indigenizing, is that a way of decolonizing also the future? And the next question that I would like also to ask, taking from Mao's statement a while ago, that it's not only looking at the local, but it can go global. So does it mean like that when you decolonize, is that also a process of colonizing the future? Those are just thoughts for that's running in my mind. You know, Sophia mentioned a while ago about decolonization, right? Maybe we can talk about that. Does it mean that when we have this approach, right, of indigenizing, it's actually a move towards decolonizing the future, right? And the next, just a thought from my side, from Mao's statement a while ago, that could it be a process again, a kind of a cycle, right, from decolonizing to colonizing the future as well? Can we start? Or maybe Mao or Sophia can, or we can have Sophia first.
Sophia, you want to go on?
Okay. So yes, in terms of indigenization being both regional and global, I mean, physically, by my physical attributes, I'm a Black woman. My family is from Haiti, which means they were brought over from Africa, Western Africa, but there were Taino natives living there. Would I ever know if I was mixed and indigenous at some point? No. But the reason why I'm making every effort, and this was really, this is such a, it, this can meander, but I think we all have some uncolonizing or decolonizing to do. Some of my favorite places and some of the most intense learning that has taken place for me, and actually about the last year, has been in a lot of indigenous Facebook groups where I don't say much because that's not for me to do. I'm there to listen and I'm there to learn. I'm not there to have answers all the time or try to insert my opinion. That's a very colonizing way of behaving in certain forums, right? There's certain forums that we just need to hold space and allow people to tell their stories without feeling the need to defend ourselves. So a lot of my journey has been, and I'll admit it was really difficult at times because there's words like settler colonist thrown around for somebody like me whose parents are first generation American. No, whose parents are immigrants. I'm a first generation American. But looking at how I show up in the world, I've moved to Dubai, I've lived in China, I've lived in Thailand, now I live in Bali, and thinking about the baggage that comes with me and how I show up to other people's homelands and behave there and the expectations, it's definitely a global thing. And given all of our stories and the similarities, I truly believe that our liberation is intertwined. So I'm not sacrificing anything or betraying my Black diaspora global brothers and sisters by standing up and spending my time focusing on Indigenous futures and amplifying Indigenous voices. I think those two cannot happen without each other. We have some hurdles to overcome. There's anti-Blackness in Indigenous and Asian communities. There's vice versa in some relationships, and that's all a result of the powers that manipulated these relationships and created certain societal and systemic structures that sort of pit us against each other. So, with the question, is this regional and global? It is very much so. And in terms of decolonization, some circles I'm in are very, I don't want to use the adjective militant about it, but some circles I'm in, decolonization means one thing: land back. That's it. They don't want us to use decolonization as a metaphor because it detracts from them being able to get their land back and become stewards of the land. And this is the number one thing for many Indigenous communities. But I'm also, because of the neoliberal way, decolonization has become a way to decolonize your yoga and decolonize this and decolonize that. So we have to kind of be really intentional about how we're using these words because they can lose their meaning. We do need to decolonize the education system and knowledge systems and wisdom systems and ways of knowing. We do need to uncolonize, right? So I think it's everybody's own kind of journey to do their research and think about how they want to talk about this. But there's not a single person on the face of this earth that has not been impacted by colonization. That includes white people. They just have a different type of decolonizing to do. And that might be the harder one, right? Because in a lot of ways, people feel like equality and equity means that they have to lose something instead of that being the way to gain collective freedom, right? There's enough to go around. So there's the metaphor of there not being enough to go around, tragedy of the commons and whatnot, and all different ways to say it. But every single one of us has ways that we can be that we can uncolonize our minds, our hearts, our approaches to things, our interactions with each other. And it can't happen in an isolated way, right? We all need to support each other and galvanize each other and give credibility to the different movements that are happening around. It's not a competition. And like Lizanne agreed with earlier, we don't need to reinvent everything. We're just going to tire ourselves out, right? If we're all waging our own battles, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. So, how can we work complementarily in terms of what we're bringing to this discourse? And how can we practice? I mean, some people might call it communism where I come from, but how can we contribute what we have and get what we need? Because that's what things were always about before, even in Indigenous communities, in Philippines, in everywhere else. It was about bringing what you can to the table and getting what you need from your community. And it always balanced out, right? So those are the conversations we need to be having about decolonizing and the individual work that we need to be have done, but also there's like very collective cultural Asian specific things, very American specific things. And that's been part of my journey too. I'm really lucky to be working in futures. I'm a beginning one, so everything is really interesting. But it's quite different on different sides of the world. There's similarities, but learning the nuance between Asian decolonization, for example, and what we're talking about in North America has also been really, really, really valuable. There's different stories that emerge and different narratives that emerge, and those can be leveraged to create a more robust and holistic and encompassing collective vision.
Right. Thank you very much, Sophia. Prof. Mao,
Yeah,
your thoughts and
sure, Reggie. Thank you. Um, I what I'm going to say, it may it may be controversial, but it's like when I think about colonization and decolonization, I think if if that it if that's really coming from the outside, um, let me explain. In my case, I think our culture, uh, it's very prone to think that all bad things come from the outside. And yeah, of course, many of them come from the outside. But I think the colonization starts with ourselves from the inside, right? Like we have to build new narratives, and we have to build new ways of understand the past, and we have to build different metaphors, different ways of understanding things. Um, and we are able, that's agency. That's agency. That's something else that I like a lot about futures. That futures are related to agency, and futures give a lot of responsibility to people to try to change what is going to happen to them. It's not only fate. It's not only destiny. And sometimes it's like colonization, and colonization was destiny, right? And we behave like if all the time it's going to be like that, then we have to change that mindset. And I'm referring here to that change of mindset. We have to create something new, and I think we can do it. Let me tell you one thing that happened here in Mexico. We had two strong earthquakes, one in 2017 and the other one in 1985, exactly the same day. That's very curious and sad, but it was September 19th, the same day in two different years. And it was a disaster, especially here in Mexico City. A lot of people sadly died. But what we realized when it happened is that values like collaboration, solidarity, humanity, support, all that just blossomed from there. And you could go to the streets. I mean, I lived 2017, the earthquake of 2017, and you could go to the streets, and everybody was helping, and everybody was nice to each other, and everybody was trying to do something to help the others. And it was very happy that time, coming from something sad, but it only lasted for a few weeks. And then again, everything became the same thing. We were just acting like if you didn't care about the rest, uh, you you were just walking by without caring what was happening to the rest of the people. And and then you realize that we have those values, and we have um, that cooperation and that collaboration, but we were not able to take that as a vision for the future, as a vision of the future that was bright and that was much better than what we had before. And it was a very good opportunity to build something very nice and very good from a disaster and from a tragedy. And as it usually happens from an event like this, which is very sad, sometimes it can come out something really good. And we wasted that chance because, again, we didn't have a vision of future, of a vision of common future we wanted. So it didn't have to do with colonization or with some ideas coming from some other region. We had the key in here to decolonize our minds. We had our own agency. We had that chance, and my feeling is that we couldn't do it. So in that sense, I think sometimes decolonization doesn't come from the outside. Sometimes you colonize yourself in that sense. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Mal, for that. In connection, I would like to, Scott, if it's all right with you, I would like to read your comment because I really like your comment in the chat box. Scott mentioned here that colonization is really the issue. It depends on the framework. You mentioned the framework definitions that we rely on this narrative. What is important is how do we make sure that everyone has the voice and agency in the futures we create. I think this is the most important, right? That even in the field futures we've been talking about this, the bringing, of course, that everyone should be, the part, right? That may be able to voice and, of course, have something to say about the futures that we create. And you mentioned one thing I fear is the narrative that we are imposing on Generation Z, and who comes next, right? Now the question that you raise here is that remains to be answered is how do we balance the decolonization needed while preventing the toxic outlook from infecting our futures? It's a very strong question, a very valid question there, Scott. Thanks, Scott, for that. Lynn Lizan, yeah, Lynn?
Yeah, well, that's a very good actually reflection of Mao earlier, that we have to start within ourselves, wherein of course we can articulate our interest and aspiration, just like what Scott mentioned in the chat box now. Or what is important is how do we make sure that everyone has voice and agency in the features we create. So usually we have two frameworks, right? The exogenous framework, that is a foreign framework, and the indigenous framework, and that is our local framework. So sometimes if we mix them together and make a composite framework, there are some differences. Now, there are conflicts, but then again, context is very important. Context, and by having that context, the mechanism or the platform wherein we can really, especially our stakeholders, our fellow Filipinos, for example, in the Philippines, can articulate their interests, their aspirations as people towards national development. So what do they need? Policies must be addressed towards that need, towards whose perspectives, the perspectives of the policymakers or the perspectives of the people. So that's another, I think, important thing that we need to embed in public administration, in governance, and in policy making. And there's one question here from Jay, the director of DILG4A, on how do we further um, change the mindset, or influence rather, our policymakers. So for me, well, education is number one, training, right? We have to begin with knowledge co-creation on how are we going to influence them to embed foresight and futures thinking in policymaking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean. For this time, maybe we can give also chance for our for those who participated in our here in the plenary. There's a question.
Can I do
Yeah,
a
Mal,
comment?
sure, of course.
Thank you. Because I think this is really important. Like, how can we further influence public official to use foresight? I mean, you guys work a lot with this, and I'm sure there are a lot of public officials in here right now. But I have also worked with this. And here we have, first of all, we have a problem, and it is that incentives are not the best for this because of electoral cycles, for instance. Like here in my country, most regional and local authorities, they have one mandate for 3 years. So that's their horizon of the future, 3 years before the next election, right? So for them, it's like, you know what? I have to think in 3 years from now. If you tell me that I have to think in 20 years from now, that is really difficult, because because they don't have the incentive. So I think that one way that we are trying to do in here, for instance, is futures literacy is very important for public officials. That's a first step, but it's only a first step, because in the end, as I said before, it's not that they have to take the first effort and from there down. It's not like that. But it is important that the decision takers have an idea of what futures literacy is, uh, because in general, they are not thinking in the future, in long-term future. And we have to give them some incentives to think about that, and that is coming from the general citizen. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. I mean, they're not going to change laws just because they take a futures literacy course. I mean, it has to come from the rest of the people. Like, you know what, you have to think in our future and in the future of my family, not only your future as public official. And you have to use ballots, you have to use your vote, you have to use the weapons you have, and excuse me for the word, that's not the right word. You have to use your instruments in order to give them the incentives to change. But in that sense, it has to come from the general citizen. It's not going to happen otherwise. I mean, that's my personal opinion.
That would be a challenge as well, right? Incentivizing people in the government, the policymakers to really engage into this foresight and futures thinking, right?
Yeah.
If we can have a lot of studies on that area. Wow, right? If we can do some sort of, or if there are countries already that have adopted that strategy, that would be a great, I mean, a literature if we may, right, to look at those cases, right?
Dr. Rich, just very very brief. No, I just
Okay,
like to
yeah,
say
sure.
something on what Mao mentioned earlier. So it's really a citizen movement. It's a citizen movement because our elected officials, they come and go. They're only there for three years and then back for another 3 years, or even not. No, and if it will begin really from the people, from the citizens, it will be really long term, and it will spell out a difference. So this advocacy of ours in the Philippine Futures Thinking Society is more of a movement, really influencing all sectors, all segments of the society to really be part of this futures thinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're almost done. We're almost there in our closing. But before that, I just want, of course, to give justice to the question asked by Felix Tono here. He's asking, maybe Dean Lizan can answer this also. In the Philippines, what do you think is the biggest hurdle to unleashing the potential of creating the futures that we aspire for? Dean, you want to respond to that question?
Oh, yeah, sorry, the question again, Doc Reg.
It's a question from Felix Tono, asking, in the Philippines, what do you think is the biggest hurdle to unleashing the potential of creating the futures that we aspire for?
Well, it's really about, one is changing the mindset, influencing others, because there are resistance from other segments of the society. But luckily, in this kind of knowledge co-creation and knowledge sharing, there's a positive response now, from especially from the students, and then from the students, because our students in public administration are working in the government. So from the four corners of the room, they influence their principals, and their principals influence the people in the community. So really, it's about collaboration. There are challenges, but then again, if we do it in a subtle way of not only informing but educating and also doing advocacy work, then we'll be able to really democratize futures thinking. in the country and in the world as well. I think Doc Reg is out of the room because of internet connection. But yes, there's another comment here. No, yeah, and before I read the comment, I'd like to acknowledge Sir Marlon. He's from Ilocos, and their area is really about cultural heritage. Sir Marlon, the floor is yours.
Yes,
Thanks
Dean.
again.
Thank you. To connect with Mao also raising that futures thinking is important among public officials. Um, Futures thinking really became popular now. So here in the province of Ilocos Sur, we have embraced Foresight with our Legislative Awareness Week that will commence on July 2, the very day where the Sangguniang Palalawigan of Ilocos Sur will host the Futures of Culture and Heritage. And yes, as stated by Dean Lisan, I can say that I can be one of the one testament being a student of DAP GSPDM that we would like to echo and download the futures thinking advocacy among our peers, especially our public officials, Mauricio. Anyway, truly, I agree with Sophia when she mentioned that there is a baggage or there are some baggage that holds us from our daily living. These strongholds appear to be negative. And again, as Mauricio praised, these are bad things. However, we would like to become hopeful that these strongholds or even those baggages are positive in a way that they appear to be the culture and heritage of our ancestors that will usher us on this present generation to the most preferred future that we would like. So leveraging therefore from legislative foresight, this will, I assume, it will institutionalize our intent to ignite the process of transformation, creating a great futures for the people and for the next generation. And as I always share, indigenizing futures guarantee that we maintain our heritage and our rich culture and do not allow it to be outwitted by technology, modern options, Internet of Things, and others. However, there must be an intertwining of these modern aspects to maintain our traditional practices. And only if we indigenize our futures, we get back to our homegrown values that for centuries have ushered our ancestors towards what we have now. So from us, the government, we transferred the relieved identity of an Ilocano, a Filipino, and a native of this land, eventually leading in this into a global framework. And finally, we must indigenize that so that we can also do what our elders did to become a responsible ancestor. Thank you. That would be all, Dean.
Thank you very much, Marlon, for that. Maybe before we end our session, the opening salvo of our Fiesta of Imagination, can I ask Sophia maybe for a short message or closing statement? Sophia first now, and also Dean Design for a closing, just a quick closing remarks. If that's all right. Sophia?
So yes, I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and they said in order to know where we are now and where we're going, you need to look at least 1,000 years in the past. And I really do agree with that. People have been denied an identity for so long. On Sunday, they found 215 children's bodies at a Catholic residential school, and people have been gaslighting and lying, and this is traumatic. There is no future without reconciliation. And this is where we keep going wrong. I think of models like Germany. Could you imagine a statue of Hitler being in town because it's history? But yet you have those kinds of things in Canada. Maybe you have some statues of people who were very destructive just there. And what do those symbols really evoke? Those are some of the baggages we need to let go. We can't just suddenly come together and say kumbaya and let's go happily ever after. There has to be reconciliation. Look at Rwanda. Somehow they did it. What did they do there? I really love what UNESCO's doing. Um, they're turning wounds into wisdom. How do we turn wounds into wisdom? They're going deep into the transatlantic slave trade and the legacy that is left on people. And they're doing great work there. There has to be an acknowledgement. It's not a toxic conversation. People think healing is coming to Bali, for example, and doing yoga in front of a rice field. Healing is painful. Sometimes it is not this glamorous, sparkly process. I'm a butterfly, for example, starts as a caterpillar, then it goes into the cocoon and becomes this mess of goo, and then it emerges as a butterfly. So maybe that's where we are. I do think that's where we are, and I really hope that we can all create space to trust in each other's stories and just listen and really become more empathic. And that's what Futures does. If you're really looking at Futures literacy, you're looking to understand the many systems at play that create this, but you're also challenging your biases on a daily basis. Every day I learn something new, and it's uncomfortable. I used to be the kind of person who had to be right about a lot of things. I enjoy being wrong about a lot of things now, and that's part of the journey. Always asking more questions and unlearning, unlearning, unlearning. It's a long journey. We can't rush it along, but there are contributions we can all make. And like Lizanne and Mao mentioned, and Professor Tagorda, it starts with ourselves. What can we do with the resources that we have available to us in our lives to just make those incremental steps, right? And just have the intention there. The intention is where it starts, to examine, to inquire, and then be gentle with yourself too. It's hard to be gentle with other people who are denying your humanity as well. It's hard, but commit to the journey, forgive yourself, forgive other people for what you don't know. We do what we can with what we have, right? So I encourage you all. You're doing fantastic and you inspire a lot of people. And thank you so much for this conversation. It gave me plenty to think about as well. So I look forward to our continued journey together.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Two words, I mean, from you, right? Reconciliation, very strong. As well as maybe I'm thinking also of bringing being empathic as one of the characteristics of that Hiraya, that we would like to bring in the Philippines. Thank you very much, Sophia, for your time and of course for sharing your thoughts in this conversation. Thank you very much. Mao?
First, I want to thank you for the invitation, and I want to congratulate you because of the great work you are doing with Futures and Foresight at Field Futures. I think really you're an example of what can be done working collectively and working with public officials, working with citizens, and I think it's a great model that we can learn a lot from there and take it and see what is good and see what else we can adapt and what else we have to do in our indigenous way to do something like that. And I think that's very important. Then I think indigenous futures are really, really important because futures are a very a great way to find connections, and we need connections now. We need to reconnect, especially now that we are hopefully we are living this COVID-19 situation. So we are going to need new models and new ways to do things. And I think futures and foresight are a very good way to find those connections we need because even in our countries, inside our countries, we have a lot of differences. In my region, it happens. I mean, it's like, yeah, we are Mexican, but there are a lot of kinds of Mexicans. We are not the same. We have different skin color. We have different language because we have our own indigenous groups, and we have and they have their own languages, and we all are Mexicans, for instance. but we have to find those connections because that's one important thing. That's the first thing, to find those connections. And I think instead of looking just at the past, we have to see the past in a new way so we can work together, and we have to try to first build a new vision of the future for we all. And Futures and Foresight is a great way to reach that. And I like this very much. We have to find a way to build a common goal, a common dream. And once we find that, we have to work for it. And that's what I think we need right now. We need to find what's our dream, what's our common dream, uh, just in the middle of all these differences. But we cannot be discussing all the time. We have hundreds of years discussing this. And I think it's a good time to try to reach an agreement. What do we want? In the end, we all want good things for everybody. Well, that's what I think. And the problem is that sometimes we think more in our own good and not for the rest of the people. So we have to collaborate, we have to connect, we have to negotiate that. And we have to build our own vision of future. And again, and I finish with this, we will realize that our vision of the future is maybe not that different from the rest of the people as we think. So thank you very much again, and see you next time.
Thank you very much, Mel. I know it's almost 2 a.m. there, right? In Mexico. Thank you for joining us as always.
2:30
Just
actually.
one invitation, right?
Very glad.
It's just one. Thank you. Thank you very much. And of course, for always gracing our events here at Phil Futures Thinking Society. Thank you very much, Mel. It's really good for us to share our what's happening in our efforts, right? In propagating or trying to democratize this futures thinking. Thank you very much, Mel. Dean, for your maybe for your closing.
Yeah, very briefly, I really enjoy this conversation of ours, and I hope you will join us as we journey towards democratizing futures thinking. And one thing I learned this afternoon from our discussion, from the chat box, from all your ideas and perspectives, futures thinking is a personal undertaking. It's right there in the chat box, it's written as well. And it's really about creating shared context, shared spaces, a shared value. So let's collaborate. Let's make this as a movement towards achieving our dreams and aspirations. Maraming salamat, Hiraya Manawari.
Hiraya Manawari Team Design. And as a closing from our side, it's almost 1 year already. I remember sharing this journey with Team Design and with our colleagues in the Phil Futures Thinking Society. That it only started just a conversation. Of course, we want to bring. Of course, we want really to bring. We want to imagine a future with everyone, and it's already gaining a lot of support from three heads to more than it's really getting its popularity all over the country now, and trying to influence as well the legislative body and even the executive body of the government, trying of course to reach of course the other branch of the executive, the judicial branch of the government. It's really a movement, and would like of course to have a movement that will really, it's not just a sort of an organizational commitment, but Dean Lizana mentioned a while ago, a sort of a personal commitment, right? That we want really to bring the idea, or to of course to join in creating a future that we desire. That's what Hiraya is all about. So thank you very much. This is a month-long celebration. You'll expect a lot of imagination, a discourse, maybe provocations, for the month-long celebration until July 2nd. I think our colleagues also, Celine, maybe you can just visit as well our Facebook page, and a lot of information will be coming out for this event, the Fiesta of Imagination for everyone. Okay. Thank you very much for those who joined and participated in this opening salvo of the Film Futures Fiesta of Imagination. And we hope to see you once again in our future activities. Maraming salamat, Hiraya Manawad.
Muchas
All right.
gracias.
Bye. Thank you. Have an awesome month. It's going to be incredible. See you there.
See ya. Thank you very much. Enjoy your stay there
Yeah.
in Indonesia. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Before we end, I will turn over the virtual floor to Celine for some announcements, and
Yes.
we have some surprises for all of you.
Yes, so I would just like to comment. It was a fruitful exchange of ideas from our panelists. We heard a lot of ideas that came from a single Hiraya foresight, and what's good is that we get to inject global concepts and even realities to it while still making its roots intact. Now, futures thinking and foresight becomes a movement, as I presume, not just for communities, but for our individual selves, and not just here, but to the rest of the world. So thank you very much, Dr. Reg, for hosting and moderating the Polylog and for keeping the momentum, and Dr. Lizan for sharing your wonderful provocation. Miss Sophia and Prof. Mauricio, allow me to extend our gratitude to the both of you. I would like to request Andrea to share this certificate of appreciation,
Oh, thank you.
which reads: Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to Miss Sophia Basil for sharing her time and expertise as a guest speaker for Hiraya Foresight, an exploration of an Indigenous based futures thinking, given the second day of June 2021 at 2 p.m. Philippine Standard Time via Zoom. Signed, our President, Dr. Lizan Perante Calina, and our Vice President, Professor Sherman Cruz. And for the next certificate, we award this to Professor Mauricio Hernandez for sharing his time and expertise as a guest speaker for Hiraya Foresight, an exploration of an Indigenous-based futures thinking, given the second day of June at 2 p.m. Philippine Standard Time via Zoom. Signed also by our President, Dr. Lizan Perante Calina, and Vice President, Professor Sherman Cruz. Thank
Thank you
you
very
po.
much.
Thank you very much to the both of you, Miss Sophia and Professor Mao.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
You flatter me with the
thank
experts.
you.
I'm just curious. Stay curious, stay passionate, and you'll have a nice adventure. But thank you so much. You guys are amazing hosts, and I know you know that too.
Thank you very much for that wonderful comments you made right there, Miss Sophie. At this point, we will now feature one global advisory board member who gave his congratulatory message. It is my honor to read the message of our global advisory board member, Mr. Rushdie Abdul Rahim. Allow me to
Hmm.
read, and I quote: June 19th is the first anniversary of Phil Futures. It is a day to reflect on Phil Futures' achievements, a day for appreciating colleagues, members, associates, and those who have provided the support and efforts in making the year a success. Therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate Phil Futures for a good year of exploring future possibilities. Let us continue to keep on inspiring others and make futures thinking glamorous. May God bless you. Thank you very much to Mr. Rushdie Abdul Rahim for sending his congratulatory message. Right. So at this point, um, of course, we would not have done this grand opening without our partners. So thank you. Just a shout out to the DAP Graduate School, PSPA, the Millennium Project, Center for Engaged Foresight, Association of Professional Futurists, World Future Studies Federation, League of Cities of the Philippines, National Union of Career Executive Service Officers, Presidential Communications Operations Office, the ILG Center for Local and Constitutional Reform, the Center for Postnormal Stud and Policy and Future Studies, National College of Public Administration and Governance, University of the Philippines Los Baños, University of the Philippines Institute of Civil Engineering, Philippine Normal University, pamantasan ng lungsod ng Valenzuela, Polytechnic University of the Philippines, kagawaran ng Edukasyon, Department of Education, Northwestern University, Batangas State University, PXD Labs, CLCGI, TUCP, of course, the Senate of the Philippines, Region DILG Region 4A, Province of Ilocos Sur, and the Junior Philippine Society of Public Administration. Thank you, everyone, for all your support that we have been receiving over the past days and more days to come as we move on to our events until July 2. So, right now, this is the part where we will be surprising you. I would now like to call on my colleagues, Andrea and Karen, to share the winners of our Imaginative.
Hello, good afternoon. So before we share, I'd like to recognize all of our Fiesta registrants for today and also for sending in your very imaginative nicknames. So we'd like again to recognize everyone. It's very wonderful nicknames you have shared for today. And now, the moment we all been waiting for is our special prizes for this afternoon. First, we'd like to congratulate Mr. Anthony M. Penaso for the Early Bird Award. If you are here, congratulations po, Mr. Anthony M. Penaso,
I'm
for
here.
being our Early Bird Awardee.
Yeah.
Thank
Congratulations
you.
po.
Thank you
Uh,
so much.
yes. Thank you. Dr. Anthony Penaso is the president of our state university here in the Philippines. So he was our first registrant who come in earlier. So thank you, Press Anthony.
Welcome, Dean. Thank you.
Thank you po, sir. You also have a mug from Philippine Futures Thinking Society. Okay, next, second special award goes to our first registrant award, Mr. Lester L. Lucero. Sir, if you are here po, we would like to recognize you.
I think Sir
Okay
Lester
po.
is not here, Andrea, so we will just give him a heads up about his award.
Yeah, okay po, Miss Celine. So congratulations again to Sir Lester. And last but not the least, we have our special award for the most imaginative name, and it goes to Sir RJY Alvarado. Sir, if you are here, we would like to recognize you.
Yeah. And the word is the imaginative name is sinagtala. So we would like if Sir RJ is here. Oh, forfeited. Forfeited ka.
Sir Marlon.
So congratulations to RJ, even if it's not around yet, because maybe because of internet connection. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you po for all the special winners. And thank you po, Miss Dean.
Thank
Okay.
you very much, Andrea. Well, once again, congratulations to all our winners. You will be receiving our customized mug, the Phil Futures mug. So congratulations once again. I would like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to our second event after this grand opening. We will have another one on June 5, and that will be about anticipatory governance. So I hope all of us can be there again. I hope to see you I hope to see all of you there. And any last message, Dr. Lizan, before we move on to our gallery photo session?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this afternoon's conversation. Thank you to Mao and of course to Sophie and to Doc Reg as well for making this conversation very dynamic, and of course to all of you, our Hirayans, our imaginatives. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you again on June 5 until July 2, of course.